The calendar has turned to August, and that means it's time for the official Uncle Lou 2020 preseason rankings. That's right. In today's video, I'm going to run through my preseason top 10. You know why I love doing these top 10 videos? Everyone loves rankings, especially preseason rankings. No one ever complains about rankings or preseason rankings. They love them, right? These videos that I do, these top 10s that I do, everyone always agrees with me 100% of the time. I love doing these videos. Let's go. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching. And yes, it is top 10 time. I do this video every August. Now, normally I do about 3 off-season rankings. I think I do one after signing day, right? Yeah, and I did that one. And then I do one after spring practices. Of course, we didn't have any spring practices or spring games this year, so I skipped that one. So this is only the second preseason rankings video that I've done this offseason, and this will be the last rankings video I do until after week 1. I do this video every single week during the season. I update my top 10 or whatever it is. So that's what we're going to do today, Uncle Lou's top 10. After I run through my top 10 teams, I will give you a handful of other teams that I considered putting somewhere in the top 10, because people always ask me in the comments of these videos, who would you have 11th? Or where would you have such and such team? I don't do a top 25 because I spend a lot of time trying to explain why I rank teams, why I do, and if I did a top 25, the video would be an hour long. So after I run through the top 10, I will give you a list of teams that I think came close to being in my top 10 or teams that I considered putting in my top 10. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already, though. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are even watchable. This one will be watchable. It might not be agreeable, but it'll be watchable. So give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, share it on social media somewhere. Help Uncle Lou out. All right, here we go. The last top 10 poll or last top 10 ranking I'll ever do in this garage. Thanks for all the kind words on yesterday's video, by the way. You guys really made me feel good with some of those comments you left about some of the memories you have of the videos that I've done out here. If you didn't see yesterday's video, I'm moving out of this hellhole known as a garage and into an actual building. I couldn't be more excited. And yes, there will be air conditioning in there too, which is great. A couple of weeks. It's going to take me 2 or 3 weeks probably to get everything moved over there. So you'll see probably another couple of weeks worth of videos filmed in here, but I am going to start taking stuff down from out here and boxing it up, getting ready for the move. So that's why I went ahead and did that tour video yesterday. But as soon as the new space is ready to go, I'll do a similar video and show you guys what the new space looks like. But anyway, let's get into the top 10. Coming in at number 10 in the official preseason Uncle Lou top 10, none other, Notre Dame. Man, is there a more polarizing team in college football than Notre Dame? Maybe Alabama, just because they've been so good for so long, right? People, if you're an Alabama fan, you absolutely love Alabama. Almost everyone else hates them, right? So maybe they're polarized. But Notre Dame, man, there's some serious hate out there for Notre Dame. I get accused of hating Notre Dame all the time. I don't hate Notre Dame. Why would I? Georgia's undefeated against them all time. 3-0. We've beat them in neutral site places. We've beat them in Athens. We've beat them in South Bend. They could schedule us a game against Notre Dame on the dark side of the moon. We would beat them. It wouldn't matter. So I don't have any hate for Notre Dame, but a lot of people do. There's different reasons for that. The conference thing is one. Whether it's fair or not, Notre Dame has sort of a reputation of arrogance, I guess, a little. And also, it's just been a long time since Notre Dame won a big game. Not talking about regular season. In my opinion, Notre Dame doesn't really have any big regular season games because they're not in a conference. So Notre Dame never plays a game in the regular season that determines a division winner or a conference winner. Now, that's changing this year, of course, because they are in the ACC for just this season. I've made videos on that. I'm not going to get into all that. You guys probably know what I'm talking about there. But Notre Dame hasn't won a major bowl game since 1989. They were winless during the BCS era in every BCS game they made it to, including the 2012 BCS title game. They are winless in the playoff era in the playoffs, and they are winless in New Year's Six bowls during the playoff era. So a good regular season team, but they have struggled in big-time postseason games. But with that being said, Brian Kelly's doing a pretty good job there. He had one really bad year. Outside of that, they seem to be winning 10-plus games a year in South Bend. No real reason to think this year will be any different. Ian Book comes back at quarterback. They had a pretty good year last year, right? They went, what were they overall? 11-2, right? Yeah, 10-2 in the regular season with losses to Georgia and a blowout loss to Michigan. And then in the bowl game, they beat Iowa in the Camping World Bowl to finish 11-2. What can they do this year in 2020? That remains to be seen. They're playing probably all ACC teams this year. But they've got some talent coming back. They've been one of the most consistent teams over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like I said, with the exception of that one really bad year they had. But since Brian Kelly's been there, 10-plus wins almost every single year. I think it probably happens again this year. They even have a chance, because they're in the ACC this year, of playing in a conference championship game, which would be unique, something we've never seen before, right? So anyway, a lot up in the air for Notre Dame this year, but I do feel like they're deserving of a top 10 ranking heading into the season, and I have them coming in at number 10. That takes us to number 9, and I'm going to catch some flack for this one. LSU. Listen, LSU was the best team in America last year, hands down, not close. You can't debate it. They didn't get any lucky wins. They didn't almost get beat. Well, I guess they had a couple of close games, but never really in doubt either of those games. They were absolutely dominant. One of the best offenses we've seen in the SEC, maybe ever, and one of the best offenses in college football that we've seen. Oklahoma, of course, has had some great offenses recently, but what Joe Burrow and Joe Brady did last year at LSU was absolutely amazing. And yes, a lot of their wide receivers are coming back. Jamar Chase. They've got a good defense, right? They'll have a good offensive line. They've got running backs. They always have those things. They had those things in 2018. They had those things in 2017, 2016. You know what they didn't have in 2016, 2017, and 2018? Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. Now, they had Joe Burrow in 2018. That was his first year as a starter after transferring down from Ohio State. But he was just sort of okay in 2018. Joe Brady comes in the offseason heading into the 19 season. They totally revamped their offense, and we saw what happened, 15-0 national champs. 2020, Joe Brady and Joe Burrow are gone. Is LSU going to fall off the map, fall off the face of the earth? Are they going to go, are they going to lose 4 or 5 games in the regular season? No, they're one of the most talented teams in America, just like they have been every single year for the last 10 or 15 years. Look at the NFL draft. It's loaded with LSU players every single year. They're going to be a good team again in 2020. But they don't have what got them to the national championship last year, and that's Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. Joe Brady in particular was only there for 1 year, right? And I know he implemented a new offense, and the offensive coordinator is still there and all that, but he won the Assistant Coach of the Year award, Joe Brady did. We had to listen to LSU fans all year long talk about how amazing Joe Brady was, how unbelievable of a job he did turning that offense around. Now, this offseason, we have to listen to those same LSU fans tell us it doesn't matter that he's gone. Of course it matters that he's gone. It clearly matters that he's gone. It matters that Joe Burrow is gone. LSU's offense, there's just zero chance it puts up the numbers that it put up last year. It's just not happening. LSU's quarterback could end up having the second greatest year that an LSU quarterback has ever had. It's still not going to come anywhere close to what Joe Burrow did last year. And LSU still plays in the SEC West, which is still one of, if not the toughest divisions in all of college football. This is not intended to be disrespect towards LSU because I think they're going to be a really good team. And yes, they could beat Alabama. They could beat Auburn. They could beat Texas A&M. They could beat Florida. Those are, these are all teams they play in the regular season. Yes, they could potentially beat all of those teams. And don't worry, if they do, they will be a lot higher than number 9 come the end of the season. I just find it hard to believe LSU is going to be able to duplicate what they did last year, considering, in my opinion, the 2 most important pieces on that team are gone, Joe Brady and Joe Burrow. I still think they're a really good team. I've got them at number 9 in the preseason poll. That takes us to number 8, Oklahoma. I should do what I did last year and leave Oklahoma at 8 and never move them up until I absolutely have to, like if they make the playoffs or something. But, raise your hand if you're tired of seeing Oklahoma run through the Big 12 like it's not even there, just to get absolutely humiliated and beat down in round 1 of the playoffs. It's like clockwork. The sun rises in the east, Oklahoma makes the playoffs and loses in round 1. No different last year. They were 11-1 in the regular season last year. Their only loss, a one-touchdown loss to Kansas State. Made the Big 12 title game. They won the Big 12 title game. They made the playoffs. They got matched up with LSU in the first round, and LSU scored. Didn't LSU score 60 points on them in the first half? I mean, it seems like they did. Second half, LSU took their foot off the gas. LSU could have scored 100 in that game. You almost felt sorry for Oklahoma when you watched it. Their defense has been their Achilles heel for years. They had back-to-back Heisman-winning QBs, right? Amazing offenses. They had another great offense last year. And their defense last year was a little bit better than what we have seen the last 2 years under first-year defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. Nowhere near the elite defenses in college football, though. Just nowhere near. We saw that in the LSU game. They ran through them like they weren't even there, right? And just got blown out in the first round of that playoff game. With that being said, they're still in the Big 12. The Big 12 is still pretty weak overall. We'll see what Texas does this year, the whole are they back thing. Yes, Texas is back. The question is, are they back to losing 5 games a year like they were back to doing last year? Or are they back to winning 10 or 11 games a year and competing for the Big 12 title and a possible playoff spot? That'll be a big game this year. It always is. Kansas State, which beat them last year, might be a little bit better this year in year 2 under that new coaching staff. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, both good teams. I don't know that they're great, but both teams capable on a good day of beating Oklahoma. We'll see. I think Oklahoma is the cream of the crop still in the Big 12. It is disappointing to watch them get a playoff invitation every single year just to crap to bed. Will it happen again in 2020? I don't know. I've got them at number 8 in my preseason poll for 2020, or preseason ranking. Number 7, this is a team I'm higher on than most people. I looked up probably 20 different preseason polls in researching for this video, and only 1 or 2 of them have Penn State in the top 10. I have them at number 7. If you've seen some of the preview and prediction videos I've been doing this offseason, I've talked a lot about Penn State and Ohio State, and in particular the Big 10 East. Now, of course, the SEC got 2 teams into the playoffs a couple of years ago, Georgia and Alabama. I thought there was a potential for that to happen in 2020 with the Big 10 East, with Penn State and Ohio State both getting in. I don't think anyone would be surprised. I know I wouldn't be surprised if you look up at the end of the season and Penn State's sitting there at 11-1 and Ohio State is 12-0, or the other way around, Penn State 12-0, Ohio State 11-1. Now, a lot of that is out the window because of all the changes with the scheduling and most, if not all, conferences going conference only. I think that makes it almost impossible for any conference to get 2 teams in this year. The Big 12 hasn't announced anything yet, really, but the other 4 conferences have all said they're playing conference-only schedules. The ACC is considering playing 1 non-con game. But anyway, I think you understand the point I'm making. Because most of these conferences are going conference-only, I've changed my mind about any conference getting 2 teams into the playoffs this year. I just think it's hard to get 2 teams in under normal circumstances. In a year like this where you don't have any conference versus conference matchups to compare, I think it's going to be hard for the committee to put a second team from the same conference in. I think you're looking at 4 conference champions making the playoffs this year. But I think Penn State has a chance to be one of those teams. Clearly, Ohio State is the favorite, not just in the Big 10 East, but in the Big 10 as a whole. They're a loaded team. We'll talk about them here in a few minutes. They're a little higher on this poll, but I do think Penn State has a chance to sort of upset the apple cart in the Big 10 this year. That Micah Parsons might be the best defensive player in the Big 10. They've got to get better play from the quarterback and the receivers. Their passing game last year really held them back. Defensively, they'll be good. They were good last year. They'll be good again this year. They need to improve. Secondary needs to play a little bit better, but I think Penn State is very, very close to sort of breaking into that top tier of teams, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, UGA, Oklahoma, these teams that seem to be finishing in the top 5 or 6 every single year. I think Penn State is close to that. James Franklin is a miracle worker, in my opinion. I still don't think he gets enough credit as a head coach. He gets a lot of credit. People talk about him a lot. They compliment him. They rank him pretty high in coaching rankings. I don't think that's enough. I think James Franklin did a remarkable. What he did at Vanderbilt was absolutely unbelievable. Winning 10 games there should get you a Nobel Prize or something. He took over Penn State when they were sort of just coming out of the Jerry Sandusky mess there. He's done a good job there. He's won the conference. He's won a Rose Bowl. Anyway, I'm high on Penn State this year. I've got them 7 in the preseason poll. Number 6, our second SEC team, I have the Florida Gators. Florida has been, listen to people talk about Florida this offseason, has been strange. There are some people, Florida fans in particular, and some others too, that are very high on Florida. Some people, in fact, most people have picked Florida to win the East in 2020, the SEC East. Some people think Florida's the most overrated team heading into 2020. I tend to fall somewhere in the middle. I do think Florida is a really, really good team this year. They finished in the top 10 2 years in a row. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them finish in the top 10 again in 2020. I do not think they're winning the SEC East. I still think the talent gap between Georgia and Florida will show itself over the course of a season, and Georgia, I think, will end up winning the SEC East for what would be the 4th year in a row. That doesn't mean Florida is not a good team. Florida is a really good team. They get Kyle Trask back, Dan Mullen, year 3. Almost every player on the team now will have been with Mullen for 3 years, right? At least. You still got some seniors on there, I guess, who come from the McElwain area. But generally speaking, these are Mullen's players on this team now. Kyle Trask, year 2. Finally, an offseason where he knows he's the starter. That also means it's finally an offseason where opposing coaches know he's the starter. He played really well last year. For a first-time starter, the guy hadn't played since 8th grade. You got to remember that. It's Kyle Trask. He started in 8th grade. When he got to high school, he sat behind another kid all 4 years. Still got a scholarship to Florida, rode the bench there for a couple of years. Felipe Franks gets hurt. Kentucky game last year. In comes Kyle Trask. I think outperformed expectations. I don't think anybody was expecting Kyle Trask to play as good as he did. He played well. We'll see if he can continue that in 2020. Florida's got a tough schedule. They got to play Georgia. They got to play LSU. They got to travel to Tennessee. We'll see what ends up happening with the SEC scheduling. Of course, every SEC team is going to play 10 conference games this year instead of the normal 8. So Florida plays at Ole Miss, which I think is a dangerous game just because of where it falls on Florida's schedule. And they play LSU from the West. They're going to add 2 teams to that. There's a lot of speculation about what those 2 teams might be. If they add the 2 teams that are next up in the rotation for each team, that's going to have Florida playing Alabama this year. So we'll see what ends up happening. I do think Florida's a great team. Could they win the East? Yes, and there are a lot of people picking them to do it. I'm a Georgia fan, so clearly I'm a little bit biased towards Georgia. I don't even try to hide that. But I think it's going to be close to a 50-50 split heading into the season in terms of who's picking Georgia to win the East and who's picking Florida to win the East. I don't think you're an idiot for picking either of those 2 teams to win the East. I've got Florida coming in the preseason ranking at number 6. That takes us into the top 5. Oregon. I'm very high on Oregon. If you look at what they're doing out there recruiting-wise compared to the rest of the Pac-12, the gap between Oregon and the rest of the Pac-12 is getting bigger, not smaller. Even over Southern Cal, in my opinion, which is probably right now the second most talented team in the Pac-12. Washington loses a quarterback. Arizona State, sort of a dark horse pick this year in the Pac-12. Utah, most people expect them to take a step back or 2. I don't expect that from Oregon. I know they lose Justin Herbert, but again, look at the recruiting they've done. If they can find a quarterback that's even halfway capable, they're going to win 10-plus games. It's just going to happen. Oregon's got to avoid the head-scratching loss, right? You lose opening weekend last year to Auburn. Okay, you outplayed Auburn. They got you in the end. It is what it is, right? You then run through the rest of your schedule heading up to that. Was it Arizona State? I hope I wrote that down because Arizona State. Playoff berth on the line, really, in that game, and you laid an egg and got beat by really an average Arizona State team. Now, you went on to win your next couple of games in the regular season. Then you won the Pac-12 title game against Utah, and then you won the Rose Bowl. So your only losses, Auburn and Arizona State, but that Arizona State loss in particular really hurt you and probably kept you out of the playoffs. I think Oregon would have gotten in over Oklahoma had they beaten Arizona State. I really believe that. I think the committee was looking for a reason to put anybody in over Oklahoma, and unfortunately, Oregon ruined that for everybody by losing on the road at Arizona State. But they're absolutely loaded. I love Mario Cristobal and what he's doing recruiting-wise. He's put a pretty good staff together there. And again, look around in the Pac-12 North in particular. Who's competing with Oregon up there? Nobody. Washington is starting over, new coaching staff, new quarterback. Washington State, no. Stanford was disappointing last year. It's just you go through the Pac-12. I don't have to tell you. Everyone knows the Pac-12 has just been down for what seems like forever. Now they've had, every single year it seems like they have one, maybe two pretty good teams, never any more than that. Would that be the case in 2020? Probably, but I think Oregon is the clear favorite to win the Pac-12 again in 2020. I do think people are underselling Southern Cal this year, and I'm no Southern Cal fan or Clay Helton fan in particular. I don't think Clay Helton really knows what he's doing, but they've assembled some talent out there. That freshman quarterback, Kedon Slovis, whatever his name is, played well last year. He's back. They've got at least 2 NFL wide receivers. If the defense can play a little bit better and they can find a running game, maybe Southern Cal finds a way to compete with Oregon and knock them off the perch in the Pac-12. But if I had to pick right now, I'd go with Oregon. I've got them 5th in the preseason ranking for 2020. Number 4, I've got UGA. Of course, UGA lost last year at home to South Carolina before losing in the SEC title game to LSU, making the Sugar Bowl and beating Baylor, right? They finished 4th, I believe, in the final ranking last year. I've got them 4th heading into 2020. They finished in the top 10 3 years in a row. Georgia has 2017, losing the national title game to Bama. 2018, losing the SEC title game to Bama, and then losing the Sugar Bowl to Texas and finishing, I think, 8th. And then last year, 2019, winning the Sugar Bowl and finishing 4th in the final ranking. I've got them 4th heading into the season. Quarterback questions, I guess. The only question I really have about the quarterback situation at Georgia, and I get it, you lose a 3-year starter, people look around and go, uh-oh, they're not going to be as good as they were. They lost their 3-year starter at quarterback. If you've been following this channel for any amount of time at all, I think this is addition by subtraction. I think Fromm was the weak link on Georgia's football team, particularly on offense. I think his limitations really held Georgia's offense back, especially last year in what should have been his best year. He never seemed to get any better the entire time he was there. He can't run. He's not mobile. His feet don't work. His legs don't work. He's got an average arm. He's not that tall. His hands aren't big enough. The list of negatives on Fromm is huge. The positives, he doesn't make a lot of turnovers. That's literally the only positive you could say about Fromm. Now, that's a good thing, but it's not good enough, not in 2020. You need a game-changing playmaking QB, in my opinion, to make it all the way in modern college football. Does Georgia have that in 2020? We don't really know. We get Jamie Newman in from Wake Forest, and people are really high on him. I'm not talking about fans and trash talkers like us. I mean, read some articles, read some NFL draft profiles of Jamie Newman. People are really high on this guy. He's already projected as a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. We've also got JT Daniels, who comes over from Southern Cal. This is a former 5-star recruit, started as a 17-year-old at Southern Cal his freshman year, got hurt game 1 last year, sat the rest of the season out, has transferred to UGA. We have DeJuan Mathis. He had to sit out last year with an injury. He's back. He's healthy. And, of course, the freshman, Carson Beck. 4 very, very talented quarterbacks to choose from at UGA. This is a pressure-packed decision for Kirby Smart, in my opinion. 99.99999% of the college football world knows that Kirby Smart made one of the biggest blunders and epic fails in college football history by choosing Jake Fromm over Justin Fields. He cannot afford to make another mistake at the quarterback position right now. He has got to choose the right quarterback for 2020. I'm of the opinion that it's probably Jamie Newman. My second pick would actually be DeJuan Mathis, then JT Daniels, then Carson Beck, in that order. But we'll see what he does. Again, it's been an odd offseason. The coaches have not been able to be around the players as much as they usually are. There was no real spring practice to speak of. Offseason conditionings have been totally different than what they normally are. So we'll see. Georgia's another team that has a tough schedule. Of course, playing in the SEC, it tends to work that way, but we've got to play Florida, a top 10 team. We got to play on the road at Alabama, a top 5 team in everyone's poll, right? Plus 2 additional SEC West teams that we don't even know who they are yet. So not an easy road for UGA, but we'll see. Their defense will be unbelievable. They get almost everybody back from that defense last year, which was one of the best we've seen in college football in a long, long time. They gave up a total of 0 rushing touchdowns to running backs last year. That's unreal. They only gave up 1 rushing touchdown at all, and that was to a quarterback. Their defense was just lights out. Should be again this year. George Pickens year 2. One of the best receivers Georgia has ever had. I mean, he's A.J. Green type material. He should have a breakout year if whatever quarterback we choose is able to get him the ball. Offensive line questions, again, it's no talent questions, just like at quarterback. It's just how are they going to play question. Georgia has recruited what seems like 100 5-star offensive linemen over the last 4 or 5 years. We do lose 4 starting offensive linemen off of last year's team, but glass half full if you want to try to find one. We had a lot of injuries on the offensive line last year, so a lot of these players who are going to start this year, who technically weren't considered starters last year, did start some games last year. Played a lot of meaningful minutes last year due to injuries on the offensive line. So I think we'll be okay on the offensive line. It may take a game or 2 for them to sort of gel and learn to play as a unit. That could cost Georgia because we play Bama early in the season, but we'll see. I think it's fair to have Georgia at 4. There's going to be people who hate on it and say I'm only putting them there because I'm a Georgia fan. Look up some preseason polls. You will find Georgia in the top 4 or 5 of almost every single poll you look at. I've got them at number 4. 1, 2, and 3 were very hard for me, and I'm just going to be honest of these, and I'll just put them all up right now for you to see. I've got Ohio State 3, Clemson 2, and Alabama 1. I think you can put these 3 teams in any order as long as these are your top 3 teams. I don't think there's any debate or should be any debate that these 3 teams should be in everyone's top 3. If you have a top 3 that doesn't have one of these 3 teams in it, I can't take you seriously. I'm sorry. In my opinion, not only are these the 3 most talented teams in all of college football, they're 3 of the best teams. They're 3 of the best well-coached teams. And, I don't think anybody is going to be surprised to see all 3 of these teams in the playoffs at the end of the year. We'll start with number 3, Ohio State. I don't really have a whole lot of rhyme or reason of why I put Ohio State 3rd instead of 2nd or 1st. Justin Fields comes back. They do lose J.K. Dobbins, which I do think could potentially be an issue for Ohio State. I'm not completely sold on Master Teague. I talked about this in the Ohio State preview that I did, and some Ohio State fans wanted to argue with me and tell me he had 4-point-something yards a carry, whatever it was. That's fine. I watched every Ohio State game last year, okay? So I saw a lot of Master Teague. I wasn't impressed. Apparently, Ryan Day and the Ohio State offensive coaching staff wasn't all that impressed either because they felt the need to go out and get graduate transfer Trey Sermon from Oklahoma. I do like Trey Sermon. It's not that I don't like Master Teague, but there's a drop-off from J.K. Dobbins to Master Teague. There just is. Now, there's a drop-off from J.K. Dobbins to Trey Sermon, too. But I think the combination of Trey Sermon and Master Teague, while neither one of them I don't think is as good as J.K. Dobbins, I think the 2 of them combined can come close to the production that you got from a J.K. Dobbins. You're going to have NFL wide receivers. You're going to have a good offensive line. And like I mentioned, Justin Fields, 50 touchdowns in his first year ever as a starter. It's unbelievable what he did. Completed 70% of his passes, only threw, 2 interceptions all year or something like that. The guy just had an amazing year. Justin Fields would have won the Heisman last year in 99 out of 100 years. Just so happens Joe Burrow had the greatest season a college quarterback has ever had. I think Justin Fields is the favorite to win the Heisman heading into 2020. No disrespect to Trevor Lawrence. I just think Justin Fields is one of the most exciting players in college football. Looking forward to watching him play again this year, and Ohio State's going to be unbelievable. They got to replace Chase Young on the defensive side of the ball. Well, you can't replace Chase Young, but they're going to have to try. But they'll still have a really good defense. Secondary, they've probably got 2 NFL players in the secondary. They always do. They're going to be loaded. That Ohio State-Penn State game going to be a great one. I'm looking forward to that. But I think it's fair to have Ohio State anywhere in the top 3. I've got them at 3rd because, they lost to Clemson last year. Is that why I put them 3rd? Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. Again, I'm not even going to argue with me if you tell me Ohio State should be 1 or 2. I'll just agree with you. I just happen to have them third in this poll. Number 2, I have Clemson, and I went back and forth on 1 and 2. So they, Alabama 1, Clemson 2. I went back and forth on this a bunch of times. I've got it's scratched out about 5 times and then rewritten on here. Either one of these teams could be one, clearly. Clemson, Trevor Lawrence coming back, and Travis Etienne coming back. And this was the surprising part to me. I don't understand these running backs who, as a junior, could clearly go pro and get drafted in the first round, but choose to come back and play their senior year. Now, I love it. I'm a college football fan. I'm all for that. It's just we rarely see that anymore at any position, particularly running back. Running backs have a limited number of miles on their tires, period. It's one of the shortest careers of any position in the NFL is running back. I was shocked Travis Etienne came back. It's even more of a big deal now that Clemson has lost their top wide receiver for the entire season. Justin Ross, he's out. Now, they're still loaded at wide receiver. Now, you don't feel sorry for Clemson at the wide receiver position. They're loaded at every level on both sides of the ball. Their defense might be even better this year than it was last year. Trevor Lawrence had an amazing year last year, off to a little bit of a slow start, kind of a turnover issue the first half of the season, but that got corrected, and they just rolled into the playoffs last year. Great game with Ohio State, came down to the wire, and then just outmatched by LSU like everybody else was. But another great year for Clemson. They'll have another great year in 2020. Can anybody beat them in the regular season? Maybe. 10-game ACC schedule. They're going to play some good teams. One maybe great team, Notre Dame. At Notre Dame, they got to play. May see Clemson play Notre Dame twice this year, once in the regular season and once in the ACC championship game. We'll see how that works out. But I've got Clemson at number 2, and, of course, that takes us to number 1 in Alabama. The main reason I ended up putting Alabama 1, they're pissed off. They're not happy. They're mad. Nick Saban in particular is mad. They're another team that had their running back come back for no reason. Najee Harris, a junior, would have been first, early second-round pick maybe. He chose to come back. They've got Mac Jones and Bryce Young at the quarterback position. I think Mac Jones will get the start, but by the time the season ends, I wouldn't be surprised if Bryce Young was the starter. I'm a big believer in Bryce Young, and we know Nick Saban's not afraid to make a switch at the quarterback position. Even in big games, we've seen him do it a couple of times against UGA, and it worked out really well for Bama and Nick Saban. A lot of people are talking about Alabama's defense. You better wake up and start paying attention, okay? The defense that you saw from Alabama last year was an anomaly. It was not an indication of things to come. Alabama has been absolutely decimated by injuries on the defensive side of the ball, really for the last couple of seasons, but last year in particular. They started the season last year with not one but 2 starting freshmen at the inside linebacker positions. And they played a ton of first-year starters on defense last year, and they are all back. Now, they lose a few players on defense, but all those young guys that played last year and struggled and helped contribute to Alabama giving up 1 million yards rushing to Ole Miss and 40 and 50 points a couple of times last season, all those young guys that made those mistakes last year, they're all back this year. And let's not forget, they're all 5-star and high 4-star players. There's not a bad player on Alabama's defense. Inexperience and youth was their problem last year. They don't have that problem this year. Is Alabama's defense going to put up the numbers we saw Nick Saban put up 10 years ago at Alabama? No, the offenses are just too good now. But Alabama's going to have one of, if not the best defenses in the SEC in 2020. It's going to happen. They lose Jerry Jeudy on offense, but Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith come back. Mac Jones played good and at times great in relief of Tua last year. Now, a lot of people just remember the interceptions and particularly the pick 6 in the Auburn game. But take that away, Mac Jones played pretty well. So it's not that he's a scrub and Bryce Young is just waiting to get in. I mean, if Bryce Young wins the starting job at Alabama, whether it's week 1, week 5, or week 10, he's going to have to earn it. Mac Jones is no scrub. 5 NFL players on Alabama's offensive line. They're just loaded. I think Alabama, without question, is the favorite to win the SEC this year and make yet another college football playoff after what has to be considered a disappointing year last year by current Alabama standards, right? They went 11-2. They lost, of course, the big game to LSU. Then they lost to Auburn before beating, I think it was Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, finished 11-2. First time not making the playoff, didn't make a New Year's Six Bowl. When you're Alabama, that's a disappointing season. They're going to look to take out their frustrations on everybody they play this year, and I've got Alabama #1 in my preseason rankings heading into the 2020 season. All right, that's going to do it. That's the top 10 ranking, official Uncle Lou top 10 ranking heading into the 2020 season. My last preseason ranking I'll do before the season starts. Here's a list of teams that came close or that I considered putting somewhere in this top 10, but they just missed it. So, they would probably be somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. Here's just a few of them here. In no particular order, by the way, either. Texas A&M, Auburn, Wisconsin, Texas, Oklahoma State. Those are probably the only ones I would say I considered for maybe the 10 spot or something. If I named any more, then you're talking about maybe in the 15 through 20 range. But anyway, so I think all those are good teams too. All those could potentially be in some people's top 10 preseason rankings, and I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it. My 10 is what it is. All right, be sure and let me know down below how stupid this ranking is, how much I'm a Georgia homer, and how much I've probably never seen a game. I love you guys. I'll see you again real soon. Have a good morning.